Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
You are listening to the Spiritual Activist Radio Show, and I am Rahasya Uncensored, where we look at the world not as it is, but as we know it can be, if and only if we have the courage to question the answers we've been given. This is our world, and it's time for us to take it back. Well, here we go again. This is Rahasya with Rahasya Uncensored, and you're either watching this on BitChute, maybe on YouTube if they leave it up long enough. But it's also, you can always catch my BBS podcast every Saturday at 6 o'clock on bbsradio.com, Spiritual Activist. And I think I'm just going to dive right into it because there's so much to say that I don't even know where to start. And I'm only putting out a podcast every 2 weeks because that's all I can come up with, to be honest with you. There's so much out there. There's so many people talking about so many good things. Tim Pool and Joe Rogan. I mean, all you have to do is start listening and you're captured by this alternative point of view that's being censored, dramatically censored. I can't place anything on Facebook anymore. YouTube keeps taking down videos. So I've gone over to BitChute. If you're watching this on YouTube, I highly encourage you to go to bitchute.com/Rahasya Uncensored and join me over there because it's only a matter of time before I'm taken off of Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. They're coming after all of us. I remember Trump saying once, he says, they're not after me in particular, they're after you. I'm just in the way. And I laughed when he said that, but now that he's out of the way, guess what? They're coming after us. Whether you love Trump or hate him, he definitely was in the way. And I wish we could have had a little bit better of a spokesperson, but you know, if it wasn't somebody that was just arrogant and obnoxious and narcissistic, I don't think they could have got to that position. It took a certain kind of person to do that. We didn't particularly like it once he got there, but what he did was pretty amazing, if you ask me. Anyway, this is an article I wrote months ago because I could sort of see things coming. Matter of fact, maybe I'll read an article I wrote on tiptoeing to totalitarianism. If you have just a few brain cells to bump together, an IQ over 70, you can figure out that something very serious is going on our planet right now. It's not difficult to figure out. If you get your news from the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, they're all bought and paid for. We've been talking about this for years, how corporate media is owned by just a few corporations. Now it's starting to show up. The reason it's starting to show up is because Trump was out there so hard and heavy calling fake news that they had to override that. And in the pursuit of overriding it, they have exposed themselves. In the pursuit of not letting him be elected president again, I'm not even going to say the words because they'll take me off, but you already know what I'm talking about. I think we should definitely have an investigation into that to subside the anger and the resentment on both sides of the aisle. But one side of the aisle isn't going to let an investigation happen if they can do anything about it at all because they don't want it to show up what really happened. But that's another story. And unfortunately, I think that's in our rear view mirror right now. We'll see what Trump has to say at the CPAC Sunday, this coming Sunday. But for right now, I always try to look at the spiritual content, the underlying spiritual meaning behind what's going on. That's sometimes is difficult, but I think somebody has to do that, because everything else, if you leave that realm, you go into the 3D polarization of what's going on. And that is, for me, it's complete madness. And even though I listen to a lot of information out there to get an idea of what's happening, um, I have a hard time talking about it. Right now, I'm doing 2 podcasts a month, one every other Saturday, and that's enough for me. I mean, there's people out there doing really good stuff. Um, I like Tim Pool. He's pretty good, you know, has his little things that I don't particularly agree with everything. The Rubin Report, and yes, Glenn Beck. I know a lot of you don't like Glenn Beck, but I do. Um, Even Bill O'Reilly. I used to hate this guy. Now I'm hating to love him, but you know, he is one of the voices out there that's speaking out. And you have to get past the messenger. Listen to the message, because if you don't, we're going to forever live up to that quote. We kill the messenger and forget the message. And we have to stop doing that. We did it with Trump. Um, Listen to what he was talking about. Everything he was talking about that he said he was going to do, he did. Everything he called fake turns out to be fake. He pretty much called it the way it is, and we just didn't want to hear it, at least some of it. I don't think anybody really wants to hear it, but you know, I'd rather wake up to the nightmare than just dream the dream and fall deeper into sleep. Anyway, I wrote this article because I wanted to come up with an article that nobody could say anything about. Um, I get all kinds of flack when I write an article, because it doesn't matter what you say, you're going to offend somebody out there. Over the years, I think I've learned how to come up with a little bit thicker skin, almost Teflon at this point. And it's not that I don't care. A friend of ours, Terry Cole Whitaker, she wrote a book. It's none of my business what you think about me. I think that's one of the greatest names for any book, other than Be Here Now, because it nails it right on the head. You know, it's none of my business what people think about me. It really isn't. As long as I'm in my truth, my authentic self, and I'm talking about the reality that I actually perceive with very little biasness, um, that's all any of us could do. Anyway, this article, I've been learning how to play the song Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. And I really listen to the words, and it really relates to something I'm writing about here. So I hope you enjoy this. It's called Disturbing the Sound of Silence. In all fairness, I should tell you where I'm at, and not necessarily where I'm coming from, which will probably become clear by the end of this article. First thing to say is that I've never resonated with mob mentality. Highly charged, polarized points of view no longer attract me into their madness, fueled only by the blind ignorance of opposing points of view. I also don't respond all that well to inflexible, blind authority, which came up in my interview with Police Chief here in Paradise. And he actually surprisingly agreed with me when on a certain point we were making. And finally, I need to make this clear. I'm not guided by the need to be agreed with when it comes to me speaking my truth and being my authentic self, especially when it's backed up by research and facts. I'm on my knees to no other organization or people. In my opinion, it's time we all get off of our knees, look each other in the eyes as brothers and sisters. I also want to add that these are my points of view, and I don't necessarily reflect the attitudes and opinions of our advertisers, because this article ended up in our magazine, the Lotus Guide. And I don't want it to reflect their opinions because maybe some of them don't agree with me. I recently started learning Simon and Garfunkel's song, Sound of Silence, and realized with the deep, timeless truth and the profound message it holds. It starts out with, "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again." I feel we all need to start talking with the darkness that surrounds us now. In this last issue, I spoke to the fact, an important word, by the way, that the Antifa organization is far from being anti fascist, and most everyone agrees with that in America. Now, it, I should add, about half the people agree with that in America. Um, and we all know the half we're talking about, and it's not the Trumpers. And this got me in a little bit of trouble. Uh, Now we're finding out about Black Lives Matter, but then there's Black Lives Matter. And I know that this is such a polarized subject that anyone in his or her right mind would not even touch it, which tells you a little bit about myself, I guess. What I can say without entering into the insanity of politics is this: follow the money and its timing. All I'm saying is we should never be afraid to look closely at everything going on right now and come to our own conclusions. That's the reason I ask people, listen to the things I'm saying. Don't believe them. Go out and do your own fact finding. It would be like if you're hungry coming to this podcast and I just show you a picture of a menu and you leave thinking that you've eaten something, you'd still be hungry. You have to find your own facts, process them, and really let them into your perception of reality before it really counts. So, going on. So, let's go on and get into what I see as a subject that we can all agree on. And quite simply, if you don't agree, you're on the wrong planet, and for sure, you're reading the wrong magazine. And in this case, you're listening to the wrong podcast. The subject is children. It has been, and here's from the song, quote, "In the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing articles that voices never share, and no one dares to disturb the sound of silence," unquote. What do you think has been happening to the children during the shutdown where 99% of the people under 65 survive? I think it's 90, they figured out it's 99.526 or something like that. They are at home on their computers and on the internet. Well, guess who else is there? Child traffickers, pedophiles using very sophisticated technology and psychology to ensnare children into situations that will rob them of their innocence and their childhood. I know this may be uncomfortable for some of you, and if it is, you need to get over it, in my opinion, so we can all start dealing with this and go after these monsters hiding on the dark web. Conservatively speaking, there are over 2 million children being held in slavery for sex as I write this. And it gets far worse. Believe me when I say far worse. No matter how uncomfortable you might be right now, imagine what these children are going through at this very moment. And when I say far worse in this article, by the way, I hesitate even talking about it to people because it'd be like talking about UFOs back in the 80s. People just classify you as a UFO guy with tinfoil on your head. But I'm telling you, what goes on with these children, from everything from satanic worshiping to organ harvesting to the obvious molestation and pedophiles and all the darkness. And by the way, a lot of this is going on in China right now, especially organ harvesting. Um, but, we have a president right now that thinks that the Uyghurs and what's happening to them in his words, paraphrasing, he says it's part of their cultural norm. I I can't even imagine if Trump would have said something like that. Um, how can a president even begin to say something like that? Biden even said when he came into office there was no vaccinations, and he got a vaccination. They videoed it before he was president. Uh, Warp speed. That was all started by Trump. How long are they going to let this guy talk? I mean, it's so ridiculous. I don't even know how to get into it sometimes. Back to the article. It's sad but true that, quote, fools do not know that silence like a cancer grows, unquote. Again, that's from the song Sound of Silence. It's time that we hear the words of children crying out for help and realize that their words, like silent raindrops, have fallen into the wells of silence. Martin Luther King once said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Only in the darkness can you see the stars. He was a good one. What do we do to the good ones, the messengers? You know, we shoot and kill them. Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy. These were amazing people. And fortunately, there's still people talking about their message, but we need to stop killing the messengers. And that's my biggest harp about Trump. He was a messenger. Let's listen to his message and forget about his orange hair. Oh my God. Don't even get me started. Back to the article. Well, the darkness is upon us, and this is what makes it possible to see the stars and hear the cries of innocence. Martin Luther King also said that you could judge the quality of a civilization by how they take care of their children. Oops. It doesn't require a prophet to write these obvious truths on the subway wall. It only takes a compassionate and open mind and heart. Admittedly, this topic is too much for some people to bear, which I feel is a testament to the weak spiritual fortitude we see in so many of today's in our world. The myopic perspective I hear in statements like systemic racism runs rampant through all law enforcement in America and should be defunded, while close to 81% of Black people disagree, according to a recent Gallup poll. It's mind boggling. Law enforcement definitely needs to be overhauled from top to bottom. But if we indiscriminately cut their funding, what do you think is going to be cut first? There are two types of law enforcement when it comes to investigation: reactive and proactive. Reactive is where it's in the face or the lands on their desk. Proactive is where they go out and often go undercover and investigate to see what's going on. Proactive will be the first to go, as seen in New York, and that's the only chance we have of uncovering child and human trafficking on a local level. Yes, it's in our local communities. Of course, training and fair wages will also go, which will leave us with the very problem we wanted to deal with. I suppose an example easy to understand is that doctors are, in so many cases, responsible for the deaths of their patients because consciously or indirectly. But it would be childish to say that all doctors are bad and out to get you, and that doctors are part of a systemic problem throughout America. And I added a final thought to this. A final thought. When the Civil War started, it had less to do with slavery and more to do with the banks in France and England, which is another story. So, how did it become a war to free slaves, you may be asking? From what I can gather, the catalyst was when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, which the fake news of the day spun as an absolute abolitionist attempt at propaganda and was banned. much like YouTube and Google are censoring information that oppose the ongoing narratives of the corporate media. But this book, along with the outspoken people of those days like Frederick Douglass, David Walker, and women like Harriet Tubman, who was a conductor, as they were called in the Underground Railroad, that freed many slaves, put pressure on Lincoln to make this part of the Civil War goals. This brings us to what's happening today with child trafficking, slavery. For everything from commerce to sex, there's an organization, one of many, that was started by Tim Ballard called Operation Underground Railroad. They have made well over 2,000 arrests of human traffickers and saved hundreds of children worldwide. I think that's a lot more now. There's a documentary on Netflix and Amazon Prime, as well as many YouTubes about him. The fact, and here's that word again, that we see very few movies about this, even though people like Harvey Weinstein and others in Hollywood are deeply involved, tells me that they don't want this to come out. Too late. What is it that makes this possible with hundreds of millions of dollars involved? International banking systems? Why don't we see it more in the news media? It's because many of them are involved at some level and to some degree. And it would be a problem if the magnitude of their involvement and participation were revealed. Even though there may be undertones of politics in this article, be assured my only goal is to do my part in putting light on and speaking up for those among us who have no voice and no way to go out and protest in the streets. My challenge to you is to, quote, dare to disturb the sound of silence, unquote. That was by me, Rahasya, writing for my magazine. So here we are today, living in a world where a lot of the important things are being left behind. They're being dropped away and left out. We're being blindsided by censorship. And I've had to make a choice recently. Am I going to keep putting myself out there and possibly become a target? Or am I just going to sit back? Well, I think I'm smart enough to get out there and talk about things and not become a target. And at the same time, I'm taking care of my own life. I have 3 acres up here in Northern California. I'm trying to make it as fireproof as possible. We're getting a couple of goats. I'm building a chicken coop. We're going to have chickens. I got a big garden. We have a well, we have a spring, a creek, and we have the flume. We have plenty of water. I'm going to make sure that my home living situation is secure, but I'm going to keep coming out here and talking about things. And I'm going to bring you other people that's trying to do the same to make this world a better place. Now, one of the things that, oh, by the way, I'm going to have a really good interview with Bruce Lipton in probably about a month. I just had a really great interview with Bruce. He's in New Zealand, and I forgot to push record. Oh my God. I have so much on my plate sometimes. And I was telling a friend about this. He says, man, don't beat yourself up. You know, when I do a podcast, I have a cameraman, a computer person, an internet person, a sound person, people taking care of all this. You know, you're sort of a one-man band. I'm sitting here at my center here in Paradise all by myself, and it's fine. I can do this, but I have to remember not to be too rough on myself when I mess up. But I'm getting better at it. So there's something here I'm going to play for you, and I think you're going to really understand a little bit better about what's going on. It's going to be a montage of things that I've seen that are interesting.
Here is a list of arrests made for human trafficking. Royal Canadian Mounted Police say 6 people charged with human trafficking 80 workers from Mexico. Also, the authorities are dismantling the ring of a large human trafficking network. I believe this human trafficking ring that the authorities are dismantling lead to the arrest and rescues in the following list. Missouri truck stop human trafficking operation nets multiple arrests and rescues. 2 arrested in Madison Heights human trafficking ring busted, 3rd suspect at large. 13 arrested in Santa Barbara County human trafficking sting. More arrests made in connection with prostitution and human trafficking ring in Utah County. New Oakland County human trafficking unit busts sex ring in Madison Heights. 6 victims, 2 children rescued in human trafficking operation in St. Joseph, Missouri. 8 people arrested for human trafficking, prostitution at Utah County massage parlors.
So the moral to that story is don't even think for a second that it's not happening in your neck of the woods. It's time we really start paying attention to human trafficking. And that's another thing that Trump did that I think is great. You know, he declared war on human trafficking. And
more than a month and a half into the nation's vaccination rollout, roughly 1 in 3 Americans still say they probably won't get the shot. This is according to a poll from the Associated Press in which many people expressed doubts about safety and effectiveness. Now, among those waiting for more research, a former waitress from Brooklyn who says that her uncertainty cost her job. Tonight, she explained her reasoning to News 4's Jackie Beckford in a story you'll see only on 4.
Now, to be clear, Bonnie Jacobson says she is not an anti-vaxxer. She believes in the vaccine, but that she's trying to have a child. It's been delayed for a year now because of the pandemic, and she's worried that getting the vaccine could delay her hopes of having children even longer.
We were planning on starting to try to have children in August.
But when she got laid off, those plans were put on hold. So when her current employer, Red Hook Tavern, asked her a week ago if she planned to get the vaccine now extended to restaurant workers.
I do have my reservations about it. Just like, I need to talk to a doctor and just see how I feel.
Jacobson, a waitress, says she was initially told it wasn't mandatory, but the restaurant changed course, telling her in an email Monday they respected her decision, but we have implemented this policy to maintain a safe working environment and that getting the vaccine is required. At this time, your employment will be terminated.
And I was just like, wow, really? Like, I just worked for you through a pandemic.
But Jacobson's firing appears to be legal. Companies can fire you for not getting the vaccine.
This particular subject is a really hot topic right now. I haven't heard of a company taking that extreme step.
Employment attorney Felicia Ennis says the EEO makes it clear termination should be a last resort.
Before you terminate anybody, you have to really be able to show why that particular person is going to pose a significant, or they call it a direct threat.
According to the CDC, the vaccine is generally viewed as safe, but the agency says getting vaccinated is a personal choice for people who are pregnant, and that the actual risks of mRNA vaccines to the pregnant person and her fetus are unknown because these vaccines have not been studied in pregnant women.
It's already been postponed. I would hate for something to happen and we get the vaccine and then have to hold off a few more years.
We reached out to Red Hook Tavern. The owner, recovering from surgery, told us he had nothing to say tonight, but would be happy to speak with us Wednesday.
I'm not out for a big lawsuit. I'm not out for money. Just also want to make that clear. It's just, I think it's an important story.
And Jacobson says this is not about getting her job back. She no longer wants to work here, she says, after being let go. In Red Hook, Jackie Beckford, News 4, New York.
now don't even get me started on the V word. You have to be careful what you say. Like I say, it's getting pretty tough right now. Even when it's backed up by facts, statistics. It's unbelievable what's going on right now. And not to mention the fact, there's that word again, the vaccine that's coming out isn't even that. It's a medical treatment. It's a RNA upgrade to your system. I don't know. I think we all should have the right to say no. Almost half the doctors and nurses are. Now, here's one for you, too. I had, my wife and I had dinner with David Icke a few years back, and he told me something that always stuck with me. He says, nothing is what it appears to be. And I tell you, say what you want to about conspiracy theorists, but when their conspiracies start coming true, it's time to listen. Definitely.
If something comes out of nowhere and it's suddenly everywhere, it's the agenda. They want to create a hive human mind where basically you're just a computer terminal with no real individuality. I've refused to acquiesce to any of the diktats.
Do you think more people should refuse to do it? Because otherwise, how will we ever make a change? It can't just be you.
If one person does something, they can pick them off. But when very large numbers of people do it together, you see where the real power is. And it's not with these people in government and the psychopaths behind them. It's a matter of doing it in numbers, and to start that rolling, someone's got to start it, because then we'll see where the power is. And it's not with the authorities. People are frightened of authority. They're frightened of challenging authority and not obeying authority, because that's what we're programmed purposely to do. You come out of the womb and very soon you're sitting at a desk and an authority figure is telling you what you can do and can't do, when you can eat, when you can talk, when you can go to the toilet, and all these other things that happen once you enter the school system. And then there are punishments and rewards for obeying authority or not obeying authority all the way through your formative years, because they are preparing you for life to be acquiescent to authority and to fear challenging authority. There's no need to fight the government or fight the cult behind government. There's no need to go on protests and wave banners. No need for any of that. You just need to say, no, I'm not doing it. We're not doing it. And then you'll see where the real power is, because you'll realize that enforcing it without our acquiescence is impossible. Now is the time to say no. And that's all it takes, no. If the 1% was basically going to get control, it had to rebrand itself as the supporters of the other 99%. And you do that via the left, not the right, from the perception of the population. And so now you've got the left standing for everything the old left didn't. And you've got the right pushing for protecting civil liberties and freedom of speech. And if you are going to move into a world, which is what they plan, of the end of countries, the end of nations, then your conservatives with a small c, they are much likely or more likely to want to conserve, to want to protect the status quo, protect the society. We shouldn't get pulled into the idea that we are dealing with an all-powerful force. That's what they want us to believe. We're not. We're dealing with the equivalent of frightened little boys and girls in short trousers who know that they can only survive and they can only continue to advance their agenda, indeed survive any agenda, if they keep the population, A, in ignorance that there is an agenda and that there is a force behind the direction of human society, and B, they keep the target population in a sense of powerlessness and in a sense of little me, what can I do? And they have to hold those two things, because if they don't, the game's over. Like I say, the game's over if enough people just say, no, we're not doing it. No, we're not doing it. It's over. That's how tenuous this cult is in its holding on to power. And it knows it. It knows that its power and its agenda can fall in a ridiculously short time if the perceptions of humanity change and if there's any free flow of information to expose and unravel its ludicrous narratives that we're supposed to believe. And this is a very dangerous time for this cult. Although it seems to hold the aces, likes to think it does, it's a very dangerous time, because there is the mentality, which can be incredibly powerful and world-changing of nothing left to lose. When you think you've got something to lose, you can acquiesce in the hope that you won't lose it. And while you feel you've got something to lose, you will acquiesce or are likely to acquiesce in the hope of protecting it. And what they're doing is they're systematically confusing young people and children about their gender, who weren't confused before and wouldn't have been confused unless this manipulation to confusion had been implemented. And the process is to confuse gender on the road to fusing gender to the no gender human. Why acquiescence is so important. How can a few people in this cult dictate to the lives of billions like this? Think of a pyramid. The top of the pyramid, you've got the cult. Tiny few people in relation to the population. And this pyramid, which is human society, is hierarchical. So the cult at the top of the pyramid imposes its agenda on the next level, which acquiesces to that imposition, and it itself then imposes on the next level. Now, as you come down this pyramid, you're very few steps down before you reach the point where the hierarchy doesn't even know there's a cult. Only these higher in around the spider, as I call it, levels know that there's a cult, unless you work your ass off for 30 years to uncover it. And so you then hit a level where they're not aware of where this is coming from, but the same sequence continues. So this level will impose on this level, which acquiesces to the level above and imposes on the level below. And this goes down the pyramid, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, until at the bottom of the pyramid, symbolically, you meet the mass of human society, the population. Now, if we acquiesce to the level of the pyramid that's imposing on us, then we complete a circuit. We complete a circuit between the population and the tiny few in the cult, which has allowed the agenda of the cult to impose its will on the entire population. If we will break that circuit by not acquiescing to that level seeking to impose upon us, we break the circuit. And no longer are the cult at the top of the pyramid imposing their will on the population, because we have broken the connection. And we've broken it simply by ceasing to acquiesce to the level of imposition imposing on us. You know there's nothing to fear, because whatever happens, whatever experiences we're having, we are always an expression, a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be. And however bad the experience we're currently having, that is what we always are. All that is, has been, and ever can be. And so this does not fear. This will always do what it knows to be right, and therefore does not consider consequences for doing what it knows to be right, because it would never consider doing anything but what it knows to be right. Thus, consequences are irrelevant. This says, I'd like to do this, but what are the consequences? And you'll always find a list of consequences why you wouldn't do it. This says, I do what I know to be right. Consequences, therefore, are not even a conversation. What we need to do is to put down the fault lines. They're ludicrous fault lines, for goodness sake. It's only a brief experience. What you are is consciousness. You are a point of attention, a unique point of attention. Celebrate that uniqueness for a start. You are a unique point of attention within an infinite flow of consciousness, having a brief, stunningly transitory experience as a human. And what is a human? It is a particular way of processing and decoding information. That's all human is. The human form processes and decodes information in a certain way that we call human. So when near-death experiences leave the body and leave that processing, decoding system that I call the biological computer, their reality dramatically changes. Stop identifying with labels. They are a brief experience. Even your name is a brief experience. You are the consciousness having the experience. So when someone says to you, who are you? You are all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience. If you meet someone and people say, well, who are you? They'll give you their name, they'll give you their job, they might give you their family background, their family history, where they went to school. That's what they're saying they are. Who are you? But that's just what they've experienced. Who am I? All that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience called David Icke. Very brief, very interesting. The point of attention that I am is an expression of the same consciousness that the point of attention that you are is. And the same with all of us. So racism and all these isms and all these divisions are not only undesirable, they are confirmation that those that go down that road are utterly clueless about the nature of reality and the nature of who they really are.
You know, this is my whole point. There's so many people walking around that are clueless to the reality that we find ourselves in, and it's an amazing reality. My God, you know, they just look around. Everything is amazing, but people are clueless. They're so caught up. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is a huge part of the population out there right now that really don't get it. And they don't get that they don't get it. There's a lot of things that I don't get and I'm working on, but I know I don't get it. And I seek to find out what it is about what I'm not getting. But some of the people out there not only don't have a clue, they don't know that there's a clue to be had. And even if it's right in front of their face, they can't see it. And this is cognitive dissonance to a degree that it's a mental illness, period. It's a mental illness. And that coupled with confirmation bias, we're walking around with a bunch of automatons. It's sometimes when I'm downtown, I see people all over the place. I see people with masks everywhere. And that's good for them. If they want to wear masks, that's fine. But evidence, scientific evidence tells us, even Fauci back in 2004, I believe it was, said that under his research told him that a lot of the people died during the Spanish flu from wearing masks, because we rebreathe everything. If we do have any kind of virus or bacteria, we're breathing it in a warm, humid environment, and they proliferate, and we breathe them back in, and we're breathing back in carbon dioxide, and we're losing 20% of our oxygen, and it just goes on. You just watch the people that are wearing masks. They're not doing all that well. So it's too bad we can't even talk about this. But let's go on, listen to some more of what is interesting in our today's world. Now, this is going to be from Shapiro on the Daily Wire. This is to give you a little bit of a glimmer of what's going on in schools. So if you have kids, hang on.
So take a gander at this. Chris Rufo tweets out, the principal of East Side Community School in New York sent white parents a tool for action. It tells them they must become white traitors and then advocate for full white abolition. Okay, this is nuts. So let's take a look at this for just a second, because while the Biden administration, I keep mixing them up because this is just Obama administration part 3, because the Biden administration has embraced the basic equity playbook here, this is what they mean. They haven't gone all the way yet, but they will. Don't worry. We're very, very early on. So they have been distributing at the school the 8 white identities by a person named Barnor Hess. And the 8 white identities stretch from white supremacist in the red to white abolitionist in the green. They say there is a regime of whiteness, and there are action-oriented white identities. People who identify with whiteness are one of these. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. Okay, what the hell does any of that mean? Well, let's get a little more specific. Here are the 8 white identities, according to Barnor Hess. Okay, again, this is being taught now at schools in New York. And by the way, at schools that are liberal in LA, same kind of thing. You're going to see this brought into public education with a vengeance over the course of the next few years. Okay, that's the prediction. Here are the 8 white identities, according to Barnor Hess. He says, 1, white supremacists, right? These are the worst people. And this is what all of American society is. Clearly marked white society that preserves, names, and values white superiority. That makes it, you're a white supremacist, okay? 2nd, white voyeurism. Wouldn't challenge a white supremacist, desires non-whiteness because it's interesting and pleasurable, seeks to control the consumption and appropriation of non-whiteness, fascination with culture. Example, consuming black culture without the burden of blackness. So if you listen to rap, but you're white, this means that you're probably a white voyeurist. You're a white voyeur, right? You're not a white supremacist, but you're kind of white supremacist adjacent. Because you're like a white supremacist in that you like all the structures of power, but you also like listening to rap music. Then there's white privilege. Maybe you critique supremacy, but a deep investment in questions of fairness and equality under normalization of whiteness and the white rule, sworn goal of diversity. So now, if you say that you like diversity, but you also believe in things like fairness and equality on an individual level, this means that you are suffering from white privilege. Because, of course, the entire system is white. And so if you say that you want everybody to be treated equally on an individual level, this means you're upholding a system that has been supremacist in the past and is supremacist today. So you're actually just privileged. Okay, then, 4th level. This is all cult crap, by the way. This is just cultic nonsense. 4th level. Okay, now we are rising. So we went from the worst and we're moving toward the best. Get ready for it, gang. 4th, white benefit. You're sympathetic to a set of issues, but only privately. You won't speak or act in solidarity publicly because benefiting through whiteness in public. Some people of color are in this category as well. So this would be like Candace Owens. So if you're a black person, but you don't speak in or act in solidarity with whiteness in public, or against whiteness in public, this means that you're of white benefit. Actually, according to these folks, Candace is probably a white supremacist, maybe a white voyeurist. The same thing for Shelby Steele. A white benefit person is a person who is actually a Black Lives Matter sympathizer, but doesn't speak out very loudly about it. Then there's white confessional. Okay, white confessional is some exposure of whiteness takes place, but as a way of being accountable to people of color after. You're seeking validation from people of color. Okay, so this is all the people who marched in the Black Lives Matter protests but are white, right? Who posted a black square on Instagram. You're a white confessional because you can see your own whiteness, but you're only seeking validation from people of color. Now, you might think to yourself, okay, like, that should be about as radical as it gets here. You're basically saying that the system, you're conceding all the points. Don't worry, there's more. White critical. Now we're getting to the people we're reaching saintly levels of anti-whiteness. White critical. You take on board critiques of whiteness and invest in exposing or marking the white regime. You refuse to be complicit with the regime. Whiteness speaking back to whiteness. This is white people telling other white people that they are too white. Because whitey make white white. Make white white. Okay, finally, you could be a white traitor. You actively refuse complicity. You name what is going on. Your intention is to subvert white authority and tell the truth at whatever cost. You need them to dismantle institutions. And finally, you're a white abolitionist. This is like the highest level. You have cleansed yourself of all sin. You have purged yourself. You're full Robin DiAngelo. White abolitionist. You change institutions. You dismantle whiteness. You don't allow whiteness to reassert itself. But by the way, what's amazing about this is that you're still the one in power, right? You're the white person who's in power, and you're acting on behalf of people of color. You are now a white abolitionist. Okay, this is the crap they are teaching to school children.
Okay, that was Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire. And that's what's happening in the schools. Let's take a look at what's happening in our corporations. I mean, if you don't find this a little bit unsettling, I really don't know what to tell you, because it's so obvious with so many of us out here really thinking about things. And that brings up something weird too. I think it was the New York Times or the Washington Post. I should look this up and read it to you. They wrote an article saying critical thinking is not the thing to do right now. And they're advising people to not do critical thinking and go out looking for other answers other than basically them. So listen to this. This is Glenn Beck.
So, Coca-Cola has found itself in a little bit of hot water after a viral social media post revealed that some Coca-Cola employees have completed a racial sensitivity training course that teaches participants how to be less white. Now, Karlin Borisenko, who is a psychiatrist and somebody who is fighting against this crazy, dangerous, and dare I say evil critical race theory that is now being put into all of our corporations. You are going to face this, and you need to stand up against it. The slides from the course, titled Confronting Racism, states understanding what racism means and what it means to be white. What it means to be white. Okay, what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be Jewish? Challenging what it means to be a racist. Now, they go through the slides, and one says, to be less white. Now, imagine, again, if we were to reverse the colors. That's how you always know if something's wrong. You just reverse the subject, and if it feels bad when you say it, then you know it's probably racist the other way too. So if I said, you need to be less black, Coca-Cola would like their workers to be less black.
You're going to see real quick, like, why I only put out a couple of podcasts a month, because I spend so much time listening to other people that are really doing a great job. And instead of just being an echo chamber, it's just better to play what I'm finding that is really, really to the point. I think you'll enjoy this.
They're pulling the damn stuff down. That's the thing. They're creating censorship to prevent people from actually getting the facts.
It's never been more obvious and more blatant. This has been going on all along, but now it's so in your face.
And this is what they won't tell you because the media shuts all that information down.
A lot of people just don't want to do this. It's one of the most terrifying concepts that has ever come into their mind.
This should not be done.
And this is what the cult doesn't want, because once you do this, now the dots are not dots anymore.
We're at one of those most critical times right now. There is so much misinformation that has been fed to the American population, to the world population, and now it's time for us to realize that the divisions that have been created among us, old against young, rich against poor, Democrat against Republican, these are illusions created so that we're fighting so that we don't see the real danger. But the level of extent of how they've just jumped to this point, I think it's because they were getting desperate. When I say they, I don't know who they is. I know that there's somebody that's controlling this. And I think it's the globalists versus, the people that are interested in having sovereign rights. So it's not the tool, it's the idiot wielding the tool. That's the thing that we got to remember. So we have to, as a society, as a world society, start taking responsibility for our actions. And these things that are happening, these atrocities that are being committed in the name of safety, it's all to create more restrictions and control. And I think there's a higher, more suspect agenda than that, which comes down to population control. Those who are swayed by honeyed words to give up their freedoms, those that are not willing to fight belligerently and in a sustained manner to retain their freedoms, will soon give up their rights to that freedom. And the eternal price of freedom is constant vigilance. Those are the things that we have to remember, because at this time, especially in history, we need to have as many voices shouting the truth. And it's not your truth or my truth, it's the truth, and letting people decide for themselves. They're pulling the damn stuff down. That's the thing. They're creating censorship to prevent people from actually getting the facts. It's just misinformation and part of misinformation, and then they're censoring everything out, just blocking it and saying, nope, there's no other information. This is it. If you're not willing to take what we're feeding you, then you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, then we'll just shut you down. We'll just shut down so you can't communicate.
They're still controlled by the same puppet masters, and
So the information that we're getting is highly, highly filtered. It's censored. You can actually look at the news here in the United States, and then you can be in a different country and you can see what true journalism is, because they're actually reporting different things.
It's never been more obvious and more blatant. This has been going on all along, but now it's so in your face that this is what you believe, this is the narrative, and if you deviate from that narrative, and that narrative's getting narrower all the time, then you're going to be silenced. In every way possible, you are going to be silenced for that. And then underpinning this all the way through your life is the media. It's basically repeating what you've been told to believe at school. And you have the government and the councils and the law enforcement, all of it, they're all coming from the same direction. Insist basically that you believe what they want you to believe, otherwise you don't get the funding. But all it is a ramping up of something that's been going on all along, quietly and subtly, more subtly. But the perceptual programming is lifelong, and they want you out at the other end, still not knowing what you need to know to understand the life that you've just had. Once you disconnect 5 sense mind from an influence of expanded awareness, one of the things that happens is people fall into fear, and they fall into basically lost identity. They fragment in their consciousness because they've fragmented in their self-identity. The 5 sense mind that they self-identify with is only a fragment of their consciousness. And if you look at what's been happening, it's all systematic. When you see yourself in limited terms, then your consciousness is limited. What you're accessing of your consciousness is limited because your self-identity is limited, and one is a reflection of the other. So as you redefine your self-identity, that self-identity expansion automatically expands you into greater and greater swathes of consciousness, because one is an expression of the other. And this is what the cult doesn't want, because once you do this, now the dots are not dots anymore. The pixels are not pixels anymore. They're pictures, they're patterns. You can see how they connect. And when you can see how they connect, you see the world in a completely different way. So they've set up an education system in which you focus at least 5 days a week through the day. You're going from thing to thing to thing, but they're all that. And then they give you homework, because they don't want you to have ponder time outside of the school. So you get the homework. The older you get, the more homework you get, and the more exams you need to pass. What is an examination? It is testing the state of your programming.
Yes, we are being programmed. And hopefully I haven't done that to you right now just by trying to open up your minds. And that's why I say don't believe a word I'm saying. Check it out for yourself. You can find out more about me if you visit lotusguide.com. And my email is rahasya, RAHASYA, @gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening in. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.